So, hi everyone. We will talk about caching and specifically caching in WordPress. So, remember we talked about CDNs, we talked about SSL. We will talk about caching and caching plugins in WordPress. There are a couple of caching plugins in general for WordPress. I do like two of them that I will talk about today. Let's see what caching is in first, and then we'll talk about how caching can help us to speed up our website, right? So generally, caching is a process that let's say you wanna go buy something, or you wanna do something, right? You do something repetitive, right? So if you do something repetitive, after a while you just comes to your mind, right? For instance, if your friend keeps asking you about some exact same phone number of your friend, your other friend, or if somebody asks you about the phone number of yourself, after a while you just remember that phone number because you don't have to think about to remember it just comes to you. So the caching generally means like small things that are highly available to you in general life. So we do have the same term in computer science, and we do use it in like in WordPress and all that stuff, all the websites. So how does it work? So as you know, WordPress has lots of plugins, CSS files, JavaScript files, PHP files, right? So now what happens is every time a user or a visitor requests access to your website or requests your website, the server goes through all these files, gets your request, based on your request, compiles the response and send it back to you, right? This process takes time. Why? Because every time it has to get a request from you, then see what you are asking it to do, and then send it back to you, right? The problem is like most of the response, especially for WordPress, most of the time the response that the server sends back is almost the same, right? For instance, if you want to just see a page or a blog post, you will get the same response, right? It's not different. Like unless you are a logged in user, that you will see different things based on your user information. You usually see the same thing. So it would be a good idea to, instead of letting the server process the response every time a visitor comes to your website, to have all this stuff ready. So what does it mean? It means that it would be a good idea to put all the CSS files in combine all the CSS files from all the plugins in one combined CSS file, or all the JavaScript or all the PHP that is handling the request. Just run them once, let them generate the result, and instead of like server going through processing all the requests, you just serve that static page that is built based on the previous responses to the user. So the question you might ask is, like, so what happens if, let's say, I change my page, right? What happens if I update my post or something like that? Then the user don't see the latest change on my website, right? So there are two things in that regard. One of them is if you change something on your website, you do have an ability to clear your cache or purge your cache, so it rebuilds itself, which means like after that any user comes to your website again, they will see a new result. The other thing is the cache timeout. So every cache that you usually have on your website, they have some timeout, right? Some certain timeout. Like it depends on how you set them or the availability of the timeout. Like let's say I would say my cache only is valid for like a day, right? So after that day, after one day that this cache is generated, it has to regenerate itself, right? It has to regenerate itself, or it has to be able to be valid, right? I will try not to go to the details of how the cache generation works or how the regeneration works, but keep in mind that like every cache object that is created in your server has a timestamp, and every request that your browser sending to your server, that server sends that timestamp to your browser, right? So the browser knows when this cache is expired, and if the cache is expired, it's asking the server to rebuild it again. Just a simple side note, right? So now that we know about the cache, let's actually go through the two plugins that I think it's a good idea to go over, right? One of them is the WP fastest cache, and the other one is the W3 total cache. In general, if you want a very simple, fast, efficient plugin, I would say go with the WP fastest cache. But if you want to spend time and optimize your website in terms of performance, then go with W3 total cache. W3 total cache is way more advanced than the fastest cache, but again, when it comes to time, you have to see which one is worth more for you. It's totally up to you which one you prefer. Alright, let's go look at these two plugins. Okay, this is the W3 total cache. I already installed it, just like all other installation, and this is the WP fastest cache, right? I'm gonna start with the fastest cache, and then we will go through the W3 total cache. Okay. So, and one more thing: make sure you do not have two caching plugins at the same time. It just messes up everything for you. Okay. If you have a WP fastest cache enabled, don't try to have a WP3 total cache enabled too. Like, it just doesn't work. It breaks things. Both of them are trying to optimize your website, and they have conflicts issues. Okay, make sure you do not do that. Okay. And one more thing: these two plugins, they have a paid version and a free version. The free version does most of the job, but if you want a more control over your stuff, you can go with the paid version too. Alright. So the first thing in the WP fastest cache is the enable. Of course, like if you do not enable it, then it just doesn't work, right? So let's enable it, and then let's submit that. So we do have some sort of cache, right? So now we do have a cache enabled, right? So these are the settings for the cache. You can preload, which means like as I mentioned before, you can this option will make sure that your website pages are rendered on the server and create static HTML pages for your visitors, right? So what happens if the visitor comes to your website, instead of actually renders on the fly, it will show it these pages. This option is good if you do not have any source of dynamic pages on your website. If you do have a dynamic pages, for instance, like a store locator or search functionality, sometimes it messes up with those options, with those pages. You have to make sure that you disable the cache on those pages. There are a couple of ways to do that. I think it's a little bit advanced, but one thing that you can do is in the plugin you can say do not cache it. Like the WP fastest cache has the ability to say skip this one, and I think that this one has the ability to define the URL for it, and it doesn't cache that URL. I'm not sure, but I'm pretty sure it does that. Then the logged in users. So this is actually a good option if your user is logged in. Usually it means that either they are admins or they are online shoppers, or some sort of they do have some sort of interaction with your website, and they just don't want to see the static content, right? Like they want to see their account, their shopping cart, blah blah blah, right? So it's a good idea to say, if they're logged in, don't show the cached version, because we do want them to actually see all the latest versions of the data. Again, like if you have a cached version of desktop, it says don't show it to mobile. It depends on template and plugins. Sometimes it's okay to do it, to show the cached version of website to the mobile, especially these days, but again, it totally depends on your template. So as you see, if you update or make a new post, it just purges the cache for you, right? You can say, okay, if I create a new post, just purge the cache for me. Instead of like I go and purge the cache, it just do it automatically for you. So you make sure that you do not have, you do have, like the visitors get the latest version of the website. That's what we talked about in a little bit more, right? Then minify HTML. Minify HTML is actually a very interesting idea, right? Let's go to actual Google, right? Let's look at the Google. This is one of the interesting things that I always like to show people, right? All right, so we are on a Google, and look, there is nothing. You cannot read anything out of this thing, right? It's just tons of garbage, right? So how do they do that? Before we go, let me actually show you. Let me see what I have here that is not. I think my website is all cached too, but let's see. Let me see if it is cached. I'm not sure if it's minified or not. So we're gonna look at it. Alright, it's not minified. So look at this one and look at this one. See, all this stuff here are very compiled together. They're very small. You cannot read it. So what happens is when this is like a minified HTML, right? So everything is scrambled together to make it smaller, which means that it's the smallest size that you can get. This way, you make sure that you are sending the least amount of data over the network, which makes the site speed load very faster, right? So you might ask, okay, why didn't I do it for myself? So although the minification is good, I realize sometimes it messes up with my CDN, and it makes my web page load way actually way slower than the normal way. So for now, I just turned it off to be able to just do it with the actual, just without minification. It works fine till I find a way that I can both do a minification and also using the CDN. I'm gonna use it this way. So what happens is, like, CDNs sometimes they can't understand the minified HTML, and then they request that original data, and then the requesting makes the page load way slower than even an actual like a load. Okay, so that's the reason that I didn't enable it, but it's a handy thing if you want to enable it, especially if you do not have a CDN. That probably will save you a lot of time. The same thing with CSS. It makes sure that all your CSS files are small and they don't have a space, right? And then combine CSS, what it does is, like, so usually what happens is, like, you don't use a WordPress by itself, right? You do have like lots of plugins that you are installing, right? So each plugin has its own CSS file or JS file that is coming with it. After a while, what happens is like each request that you send to server, it has to go and get each of these style sheets or JavaScripts unloaded in order to load their website. So what this caching does is it gets all these CSS and JS files and it puts them together. When it puts them together, it reduces the size of the requests, right? Instead of like your browser requesting for 10 different files, 10 different CSS or JS files, you just ask for like 1 or 2, right? So it will be way faster. So that's why that's the combined JS and CSS how it works. Gzip will just think about like a zips your file or compresses your file. It's a technology that many people are using. It reduces your file set that your server is sending to your browser, right? And then again, browser caching, it puts stuff in your browser, so the next time the same visitor comes to your website, instead of loading stuff from your server, it just loads it from its browser, right? And then render block.js and Google Fonts async. I personally think if a plugin developer did a good job, there is no need for asynchronously load the Google font, because Google fonts are usually big in terms of size, so they have to be loaded in asynchronously. But sometimes the developers are just lazy and they just put it up, which messes up with the site speed. Render blocking JS means, so what happens is like, let's say you have a JavaScript file, right? You have a JavaScript file, and your browser starts to render your page, and it gets to this JavaScript file. So it has to render this JavaScript file before it goes to the rest of the website, right? So if that JavaScript file is not really necessary for the page load, you should just let the page load and then start processing that script. So this option, which is a paid option, which makes sure that it renders the stuff after the page loads. Sometimes it messes up with the tracking information or the scripts that you actually want to run. So I usually don't even enable it if I do have that option, but it's good to know what's going on. Okay, so deleting cache it just tells you like what happens, like how the deleting cache works. It just deletes the whole cache, especially like a static website. This is the deleting the minified version of the CSS and JavaScript that you have. Timeout rules, as I mentioned, like you can set a timeout rule, so after certain time the cache will be expired and the new cache had to be replaced. Image optimization is another good thing that I think this plugin has, but keep in mind you can do it yourself too. So what the image optimization does is make sure the images have the right size and they load correctly, right? So for instance, if you have a 1 meg image and you put it on the web page and you make it smaller in terms of size, but not actual the dimension, but not actual size, this will make sure that it actually scale it down so it takes less space. Premium is you can go premium, of course. You can see the premium stuff, and then this is the page that I kind of mentioned. You can exclude user agent, exclude CSS or JS or URL that you think has a dynamic file, dynamic content, and you do not want it to be cached, which makes sense. CDN, we talked about CDN. You can connect to CDN to be able to provide your static assets over the content delivery network, and then the database is optimizes your database in terms of querying and optimization. Again, it's a good idea. It's a good option to have, but the most important part, I think, in the is the stuff that they are here. So this is about the WP fastest cache. Now I'm gonna go a little bit faster on the WP3 total cache because some of the stuff that we talked here are the same over there. But let's go look at it. So this is a performance. Let's go to dashboard. Okay. So the W3 total cache. As you see, it's a beast. It has many things that the fastest cache didn't have, right? So generally it takes more time to set it up too. Alright? As soon as you open it, it tells you, okay, it's the best idea. Like you can do a max CDN, you can do Neuralink, and you can do a Google site speed thing, right? Google site speed is another tool that you can check your site speed. I'm not gonna talk about it today, but it will in the future video. I'll talk about how you can use it. It usually even gives you a score, and if you go to the Google Page Speed Tools, even it gives you the images with the optimum size. Okay, all right. So preview mode is just makes like a staging area for you when you enable like changing each of this stuff before it goes live. Okay, then again, page cache is enabled. Like if you do this, the caching will be enabled, right? Then page cache method is disk. Usually works good. Enhanced, I'm not sure exactly what's the difference between basic and enhanced, but enhanced is good. If you have a dedicated server or virtual server, you can go with this one. I do not suggest you do it unless you know what exactly these two APC and APCU are, right? You have to do some configuration, which we will not go through at least today. On a side note, it's a really good idea to have your own virtual VPS server, and these days they are not very expensive. It has a little bit of learning curve in general, but after that you will see the lots of opportunity that is available to you in terms of flexibility and speed, right? For instance, one of the things is like if you see your website is slowing down because you have lots of visitors, you can just simply increase the VPS and you do the rest of the stuff. You can have all sorts of application in there without any limitation. Okay, so it's a good idea to have a VPS. Alright, let's go to minification. Again, the same idea happens here. It says, okay, do you want to minify it? How do you want to minify it? Do you want to do it manually or automatically? And where do you want to put it, right? So the same minification rules happen here. Opcode cache is like a object storage cache, and it returns like an object. It caches or stores stuff based on the key value pairs, so you can retrieve them faster. Database cache is just puts your whole database into actual disk, the results and the stuff that it needs usually, so it makes it faster. Object cache again is like a key value pairs that it will save it. Browser cache is for like repetitive visitors, like the ones that WP fastest cache has it. It's the same idea here. Reverse proxy, I honestly don't know this one. so I'm not gonna talk about it. And then it has a monitoring in terms of how your cache performance is working. Fragment cache, it simply, let's say you do like for instance, every visitor that comes to your website searches for certain things, right? This will make sure that that thing happens very fast, right? Then here is like a licensing for you can put a license and upgrade, of course. Then it has some debugging information that you can just if you see something wrong with the cache, you import, you enable it, and you see what's going on, right? And then one of the cool things about this is, like, if you set up this cache on other website and you are happy with the configuration, you can just export the configuration from there and then import it here, so it saves you a little bit of time, right? I think that's about it. One of the advantages that this one has is this page, right? So see, for instance, if you have a VPS, you can do these things too. So it tells you exactly how to go for more cache, right? Of course, you have to know like what this command does and how does it work. For instance, this is just a general. This is not an actual command on my server, right? This is just setting a permission in terms of who has a read or write access, which group has which access on which folder, right? So you have to do that, and you have to go and copy this stuff in your htaccess rule. As you see, there are like based on the modules that are on your server, you can do lots of things here, right? Then it tells you, like, if you have a VPS, you can do this stuff to make it way faster, right? Memcache installation, like all sorts of different caches. It tells you like how to do it and how it helps you in terms of page speed or site speed, right? It's a very intense tutorial. If you know your way around like a command line and Linux in general, it's a really good tool to go through and install the required modules and plugins to make sure you get the best benefit of all sorts of caches. So I'm sorry this video is a little bit longer than normal, but I hope I cover most of the cache types and how they work. If you have any questions regarding the cache installation, monitoring and stuff, write a comment and we will be happy to answer you. Thank you.